When do we know we've done enough?
That's such a good question.
It's loaded. It's not even an easy one, but
I think there is no such thing as enough. And that's what's really difficult about working in this space, right? I think by way of public messaging, we speak in very blanket terms, right? We talk about having 10 years to solve the climate crisis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The reality is there are some climate tipping points, right, that have already been triggered, right? Systems that have been triggered where natural ecosystems or really precious parts of our planet are kind of in an exponential decline that we can't actually stop. And this is really difficult because there is no definitive point where we can say, okay, and I read a different article every week, which is like, okay, we need to mobilize within the next 6 months, or we have the next 10 years, or we have the next 15 years. There's no right answer. Yeah. And I would say there's never going to be enough, right? There's never going to be enough that you can do as an individual. But what you can do is look within yourself and subscribe to being in service of something that's much bigger than any one of us as individuals, and act enough to be able to look back on our lives, hopefully when we all grow to old age, and know that we did everything in our power to act on the issues that we really cared about. And I don't think there's anyone who can objectively say this is enough or this is not enough. And that's not something that we can really subscribe to. It's very much something personal that you have to look to within yourself. And I think that's where you can really find a lot of the answers. I will say that there's a real trap for young people who are in the activism space and who are trying to create change when we're constantly hounded by this feeling of not doing enough. And I know that I had a bit of an emotional breakdown last year when the fires were raging back home in Australia. And I was doing so much kind of like mental gymnastics because I think I'm someone who is very, has created a persona of being very positive and optimistic. And that's who I am, but it's one part of who I am, right? But I was so attached to that I was not allowing myself to grieve about what was happening back home. And I was not willing to really confront it and own up to it. And I felt really guilty. I felt a lot of shame of not being there. I felt shame on behalf of civilization. I felt guilty that I wasn't doing enough. And yet none of us on an individual level can ever do enough, right? The moment I assume the responsibility of the world, the moment I assume the responsibility of solving climate change, that's a sure way to burn out. And it's a sure way of making yourself kind of useless to the world because you're doing it from this place of savior complex, right? You're doing it ultimately from a kind of place of ego. And I know that sounds kind of paradoxical, right? Because you're trying to change a problem outside of yourself. But the moment you do it, not attached to a specific outcome, not attached to a specific expectation of, yes, solving the climate crisis. And the moment you shift from that place to just doing it because you check into that internal radar and because you know it's the right thing to do in the present moment, that's what's going to be enough. But there's every chance that we will fail to solve the climate crisis. There's every chance that not enough people will step up, not enough people will act. And I have to go to work every day being okay with that and knowing that. And it's a really difficult pill to swallow, but it's something that each and every one of us needs to do, or else we're going to drive ourselves completely mad.
Yeah, it's almost like you're stuck between a rock and a hard place in this scenario because hope is a very powerful idea, I think. And to be hopeful, or I think for many of us, and myself included, there's a thought in the back of my mind of what if we're doing all of this for nothing and the time to shift has already passed, right? Mm-hmm. What if this a massive surge is just too much? And that's where I think, I mean, in Joey and I's experiences, or I'll actually just speak for myself, but we've both had experiences with anxiety, panic attacks, and the likes. And a lot of that comes from this deep-seated feeling of, oh my God, I don't know what's going to happen in the future. How do I control anything? I think what you're saying here is so definitively important because it it recognizes the state of this world, but also at the same time demonstrates that, hey, shit might be going crazy right now, but at least we can do something so we can alleviate that feeling when we're on, say, our deathbed.